Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I am here to talk about my 5 least favorite books that I read in 2019. So I don't like to do big long lists of my least favorite books because negativity isn't really my go-to vibe with BookTube. I don't mind filming negative reviews in wrap-ups, and every now and then I have fun doing a rant, but I don't like to spend big long videos just detailing every book that I didn't like. So as usual, as I've done with the past few years of my channel, I have chosen 5 books to talk about, my 5 least favorite things that I read in 2019. It's interesting because there is one 2019 release on this list, and it isn't my least favorite 2019 release that I read, so I would say that this is more a list of my most disappointing reads, or the books that made me the angriest. Hopefully you can kind of see what I mean once I get into these 5 books when I say that they're my least favorite in a lot of different ways than just star rating, and when I was doing my 2019 ranked and reviewed video, I was focusing on star ratings. This is more about what really let me down and made me angry in 2019. So we are going to start with number 5 and work up to my least favorite thing that I read in 2019. If you want to place your bets, what's going to be in this video, go ahead and pause and put your guesses down in the comments below. I feel like I'm a lot more vocal about the books I love than the books I hate, so I feel like this is going to be more difficult than my favorites of the year video, where you all guessed what my favorite book of the year was going to be. I don't know if you will all remember what my least favorite book was. But we'll just have to see. So with that little intro out of the way, let's go ahead and jump in, and we'll start with number 5. I just had a flashback to my Top 5 Wednesday intro. The Top 5 Wednesday thing. Oh, do you remember when that's all I did on this channel? I did so many Top 5 Wednesday videos. Coming in at number 5, we have Black Wingsbeating by Alex London. This is my 5th least favorite book that I read. This is the first part of a YA fantasy duology. It follows twins, a brother and sister. Bryson and Kylie are their names, and this whole world is basically built around birds. Birds are a huge part of their belief system, their power structure, what they spend their time on, commerce, everything is about birds. Bryson really wants to be a great falconer, but he's not very good at it. But he also loves to bet, so he says he's gonna, redeem himself. He's gonna go catch this impossible bird, the near-mythic ghost eagle. But Bryson, as I've said, is very bad at this, and Kylie's a natural, even though she hates catching birds, so she sets out after her brother to see if she can, save his life and his pride. I feel like my feelings on this book are leaking into me trying to give you a summary of Black Wingsbeating, because I just didn't like any part of this, but mostly I hated Bryson. With, my whole heart, I hated Bryson. He's just, his entire character is that he has a lot of pride in what he does, but he's shit at it. So his pride is always hurt, and he always lashes out at others, and he never really has to apologize for this. His sister fixes everything. She fixes every problem that Bryson ever creates, and he just gets mad at her because he is the one who should be good at things, and, she's just inserting herself into his life. Bro, your life would be a fucking disaster without your sister, so maybe dial it back a few notches. And Kylie spends her entire life apologizing for helping to make Bryson's life not shit, and she only kind of gets over that. She's still pretty much apologizing all the time. I didn't give it a 1-star rating because I thought the rep was important, and I usually only give 1-star reviews if they're, really harmful representation. Bryson is a guy who likes guys, queerness is super normalized, and Kylie is Arrow Ace, as described by the author. Maybe that would be more confirmed in the second book, but in this book it was really weird because she had a childhood friend who is constantly hitting on her, even though she insistently is no, I have no interest in being in a romantic relationship or ever, nothing. He just keeps doing it, and that's never really called into question either. I hated reading this book. I'm not reading the sequel. And I pretty much decided not to read any more Alex London books. That's where I was at the end of Black Wingsbeating. Next up, we can chat about The Good Girl by Mary Kubica. This is a thriller. It's a thriller. I read a few 2-star thrillers in 2019, but I feel like The Good Girl is a perfect example of what I hated about thrillers that I read in 2019. Like, there were a few I enjoyed, but oof. Here's the thing. I like thrillers, but they rarely stick their landings. They usually end and they're shit. And they really lose rereadability, which is a huge deal for me. Like, the end of a book really makes a book, in my opinion. If the end is garbage, I'm never gonna want to revisit that. And it's retroactively made me angry that I spent time thinking the book was gonna be good, only for it to just be garbage at the end. The Good Girl is about a girl. She's good. And she has disappeared. She's been taken. And so we're getting multiple storylines of the girl after she's been found and she's, like, recovering. We're getting a story from the kidnapper, like, as he has this main character. We're getting a storyline from the girl's mother while they are looking for her, and from the detective searching for her. Ugh. Talking about this book makes me so, like, tired. I just feel tired. So, like, this was good. I was invested. I was thinking I was gonna give it, like, a 3-star. And then about halfway through, I had this thought. And the thought was, what if this book ended this way? And then I thought, no, that would be the stupidest possible way for this book to end. And then that's how the book ended. Thrillers. The way thrillers usually go for me is that I read them, and as I'm reading them, once it hits a point where I realize that the end is going to be bullshit, I start describing the book in detail to my roommate Brian. Like, we give every character names so it's easy for him to remember, and I explain the whole plot so that I can lead up to explaining why the end is bullshit, so that I can have someone else to go, that's stupid, and I can go, I know, thank you for agreeing with me. And there just reached a point when all of a sudden I was aware, oh no, the worst ending that I predicted is going to be the case, and now it's time to hate read to the end of this book so I can be free of it. Moving on, in the number 3 spot, we have The Devouring Gray by Lynn Herman. Oh, this is really on here because it was a most disappointing read. This is what I was talking about, where this is the only 2019 release on this list, and it wasn't necessarily my least favorite 2019 release. It was just the 2019 release that let me down the most because I had the highest expectations for it. The Devouring Gray is a Raven Cycle Stranger Things inspired book set in a small New York town called Four Paths. Basically, at Four Paths, there used to be this monster, and then the founders of the town caught and trapped the monster, and this is about descendants of those 4 founders. Founding families are supposed to have specific magical abilities. There's one character who never inherited magical abilities, which they're really trying to keep under wraps. And there is one founder who has been gone for a while, and so now she's a new person in the town, and she doesn't know anything about it. And the people who live in Four Paths are slowly starting to realize that the founders' families are kind of terrible and they don't want them in charge anymore. So I was really hyped about this book because you all know I love the Raven Cycle. I live and breathe the Raven Cycle. And for it to be that plus Stranger Things, I was like, this is gonna be my perfect book. This is my ideal book. And then this was just like shitty Raven Cycle fanfic. And that is coming from someone who has read a lot of Raven Cycle fanfiction. It's not just out of nowhere that I say this. I say this as a person with an intense knowledge base in this area. Justin and Isaac are the most obvious Gansey Ronan knockoffs that I've ever read about. And I don't say, like, inspired characters, they're knockoffs. They're, like, worse versions of those 2 characters. It's weird because this was billed as, like, a more diverse Raven Cycle, but it wasn't. It was pretty much exactly as diverse as the Raven Cycle. The rep was different for different people. The only thing that this had going for it that the Raven Cycle didn't is that this had 2 female main characters, as opposed to just the one in the Raven Cycle. I hated reading this book. Every twist, I was just rolling my eyes because it just felt so obviously like a ripoff of something that I really cared about. So this is another one I won't be continuing the series. I was hate reading it by the time I got to the end of this. It just made me angry that really good media exists, and this is just a shittier version of that good media. Yeah. At the number two spot, we're gonna go with This Is Kind of an Epic Love Story by Kacen Calendar. This book I didn't just hate reading, it legitimately put me in a very bad mindset, and if I had been more aware of my mental health at the time that I read this, I would have stopped reading it. I just would have marked it as a DNF and moved on with my life because it wasn't healthy for me to read this book. This is supposed to be a love story between two queer boys of color, which is why I wanted to read it. Beyond that rep, the love interest is deaf, and there was so much cheating in this book. There was so much cheating in this book. Everyone cheated on everyone, and no one ever talked about it, and no one ever had any consequences for it. And that's something that, like, affects me mentally very badly, because it's something I have experience in, and it was infuriating to read, and it made me feel awful. Reading this felt awful because I wasn't reading a love story. I didn't like any of these characters. I didn't need any of them to be happy because they were all such horrible people. This main character wasn't a nice person, and he had a boyfriend who was kind of nice, if a little, you know, like, they probably should have been communicating more, but he was terrible. It makes me angry to talk about this book because of what a negative impact it had on my mental health. So that's the end of what I'm going to say about it. I am not alone in my feelings on this book. A lot of other people had similar problems. I want to read love stories, and I don't see cheating as the gateway to a nice love story. It just makes the reading experience supremely negative to me, and that's why I hated reading this. Now, for basically this entire video, I've been saying I had 5 least favorite books of the year. What I meant to say was 6, but this last one is actually 2 books that are part of the same series. So with that hint, anyone who hasn't guessed already, I feel like maybe you'll be able to guess what my least favorite books of the year were, but I did read these in January, so it has been a long-ass time, and it's possible you all forgot that I even read these. My least favorite books that I read in 2019 were Bronze Gods and Silver Mirrors by A.A. Aguirre. This is the Apparatus Infernum series. I would say a duology because this last one was published in like 2013 and there's been no news since then, so it's probably just these 2 books, which I hate read in January. Basically, these were part of a January TBR challenge where Brian made up a bunch of challenges. We went to Barnes & Noble and I bought books based on those challenges. When I was there, I bought Silver Mirrors, and then once I got home, I found out it was the second book in a series. So I bought Bronze Gods, read Bronze Gods, hated it, and still read Silver Mirrors because I was like, this was my challenge. I have to see it through. These books were repetitive and silly. They were held down by so much unnecessary info, so much unnecessary writing. The amount of times that someone would say something in dialogue and then it would be repeated as narration just slightly differently was infuriating. These each could have been half their length if we just didn't say, like, I don't want to see you anymore, he said, not wanting to see her anymore. Like, no, bad. That's bad writing. You did a bad job. Also, this book had some really, like, shitty gender politics. You've got a male detective and a female detective, and I swear to God, this male detective carried the female detective out of serious things so many times. She spent so much time in his arms. And, like, the whole thing is that will they, won't they? Will they be together? Maybe they won't. They work together. They're professionals, but are they? And, like, it was so pointless from page 1. You knew exactly where this was going. You knew they were going to try to push these 2 together, and they had to keep changing aspects of the characters to make it work. Not, like, developing characters to make it work. changing the characters entirely so that they would actually be together in some version of reality. And she just kept getting hurt, and he just kept carrying her. And, like, that's fine once or twice, but if you're gonna have, like, this woman who's the only female detective in this entire city, and everyone's like, I don't know if she can solve crimes as good as a man can, if that's your whole basis, then she's gonna need to be, like, actually a good detective, and she'll need to be able to hold her own. She can't just get injured at the slightest chance that they're close to getting a clue, just so he can carry her out of yet another murder scene. I hated reading these. I hated reading these. So yeah, these were my least favorite books that I read in 2019. I gave them each 1 star, and I hope to never again read something that's written as poorly as these 2 books. Okay guys, that is it. Those are all of the books that I wanted to talk about, my least favorite, my most disappointing reads of 2019. Did you guess any of these right? I would love to hear if you did, and if you didn't guess any of these, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you've read these books, or if you haven't. Let me know also in the comments below what your least favorite book was that you read in 2019. Let's get our rants on. Tell me what you hated, why you hated it. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in another one very soon. Bye!